So this happened on Monday, correct? We didn't get to it on Tuesday, but as you know, and it was interesting, this also coincided with a piece in Vanity Fair, I believe it was, that suggested that MSNBC was going to bring on more Bernie-friendly people because they were aware of the fact that they don't have any Bernie-friendly people on. And I would even go a little further than that. The majority of people, not necessarily the hosts in prime time, but the majority of hosts, to the extent that they have an opinion, it is one of hostility. Last night after the debate, I was watching some MSNBC, and Stephanie Ruhle made the claim that Bernie Sanders had as many, if not more, situations in terms of saying things to women than Michael Bloomberg did. Now, that's simply not true. I suspect what she's referring to is that piece of satire he wrote 40 years ago. NPR did a breakdown of this in 2016. It was satire. There was a lot of things that were written like that at that time.
Yeah, it was the language of radical feminism at the time, which is the ironic part.
Yes, and it was a piece that criticized traditional gender roles. Nevertheless, that is fundamentally different than telling people who are working for you, saying things to them, treating them in such a way that you need to pay them off not to talk about it. But she went unchallenged because they don't have the resources in terms of people there who are going to say, like, actually, I know what you're talking about and you're wrong. They theoretically could have invited me on. I am a paid contributor. I get paid only when I show up there. So and it's not that much. I can assure you that it wouldn't in any way inhibit their desire to have me there. I think the car ride that they send probably is the pricey part of that. But nevertheless, the network is clearly conscious that they are ill-positioned for Bernie Sanders to deal with Bernie Sanders if he is the nominee. And Chris Matthews has been saying like a series of things that, are
crazy.
Some are offensive and some are just like Looney Tunes. The Mangio line that he used, I think it's in poor taste if you're sensitive to the fact that Bernie Sanders lost family members in the Holocaust, to use that analogy. But some people say, well, it's just a standard, military analogy. That I think you could accept that as well. But what that analogy belied, what it revealed was that Chris Matthews saw Bernie Sanders win in the same way that the French did when their country was overrun by hostile forces.
The metaphor still means what it means, despite it being tasteless.
Exactly.
It's hard to leave out context when you're talking about Nazis.
Right. Well, but I understand that. But I think there's, people can get sensitive about the Nazi. But I'm saying, even if you just perceive that as a military campaign type of situation, when you talk about my feeling was I was thinking of this, it's like saying I found out that Bernie won and all I could think of was like the Titanic. Wait, what? That was a horrible tragedy.
Exactly.
What's his job title? Isn't he supposed to be a journalist?
Well, no, look, you can have an opinion. It's just that it's a little bit problematic to see this as such a tragedy. It really, positions you, I think, poorly.
Yeah, he's taking the mask off.
Exactly. And people didn't like what they see. And so he came on the next night and said this.
Before getting into tonight's news, I want to say something quite important and personal. As I watched the one-sided results of Saturday's Democratic caucus in Nevada, I reached for an historical analogy and used a bad one. I was wrong to refer to an event from the last days, or actually the first days of World War II. Senator Sanders, I'm sorry for comparing anything from that tragic era in which so many suffered especially the Jewish people, to an electoral result in which you were the well-deserved winner. This is going to be a hard-fought, heated campaign of ideas. In the days and weeks and months ahead, I will strive to do a better job myself of elevating the political discussion. Congratulations, by the way, to you, Senator Sanders, and to your supporters on a tremendous win down in Nevada.
Now, I got to say, as far as like apologies go, that was spot on. I mean, he
was a good apology.
He really clearly understood what was problematic about that. He was talking about something horribly tragic and comparing it to his feelings of someone's victory. And it's not like, you know, I'm sorry. There is just no world in which, you know, anybody who has been saying that, you know, Donald Trump is the end of our democracy can look upon Bernie Sanders winning and perceive that as a existential tragedy.
It's a good view into the Chris Matthews mindset.
Yeah. And I think, like, look, the bottom line is he's a professional. And it's one thing for him to feel that. That's all fine. People have different opinions about different people. But when it becomes so expressed and so obvious, then you're just not being a professional. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, liberals on MSNBC aren't supposed to conduct themselves like Chapo Trap House.
I just think, I mean,
that's right.
I just think that, you know, well, Chris is in a comedy league of his own. But like, yeah, I mean, I like that. I think the apology is fine. And I think the goal is not to, you know, try to corner him or force him to quit. The goal is to, you know, the bigger point is that the voices are not there to push back, and there isn't several other people on the panel being like, dude, you're like Cold War paranoia or whatever story you've told yourself about Castro in the 60s has nothing to do with the immense economic squeeze on young people that they're finding appealing in the Sanders candidacy, as an example.
Right.
It's about the actual participation, not the optics, which I think actually transitions well into some ways into the next segment, because the problems persist.
So the night after Chris Matthews apologizes in what I think we've characterized as a very good apology. You know, who knows what the sincerity level is. I get the sense that it was probably sincere. I think he realized at the very least that he was unprofessional about that. Often what happens with people, I know with myself, I mean, I remember when I quit law school, I was like, I'm going to quit smoking, right? Because you want to balance it out. And I didn't, not for a long time. But in other words, sometimes, like, when you're dealing with like sort of emotional things, like there's a certain whack-a-mole that happens. So you press down and you subjugate that sense of like, oi, I should not be so overreactive to Bernie Sanders' win.
Red Dawn sort of scenario.
Yeah, Red Dawn scenario. And like, this is not an existential tragedy that he won in Nevada. I got to tamp that down. And then what happens is something else pops up, and that happened after this debate.
So much, Brian. Do you believe that the former mayor of New York said that to a pregnant employee?
Well, a pregnant employee sure said that he did. Why shouldn't I believe her? You know, I'm just really tired of this world. This one is personal for me. It really is.
But you believe
Pregnancy
that you believe he's that kind of person who did that?
Look, pregnancy discrimination is real. And we have gone on and on and on where people say, oh, I can't really believe the woman. Really? Why not? Yeah. Mayor Bloomberg has non-disclosure agreements for who knows how many women. And it's not just the one. The whole point is, how can you actually trust someone who will not just say, look, I'm going to waive on non-disclosure on sexual harassment and discrimination. Yeah. Anybody who has a story to tell can come tell.
Sure, I agree with everybody deserves a credible response when they make a charge like that. My question about him, you believe he's lying?
I believe the woman.
You believe he's
Which
lying?
means he's not telling the truth.
And why would he lie? Because just to protect himself.
Yeah. And why would she lie? I mean, that's the question, Chris. Why do you assume
it's a striking
that
event.
he's the guy?
I just want to make sure you're clear about this. You're confident of your accusation.
Look, all I know is what she said and what he said. And I've been on her end of it in the sense of discrimination based on pregnancy.
What is stunning about this is his lack of credulity. Like, but why would he lie about this?
Just to be clear, it's because it's an enormously embarrassing event, which is damaging for his career. So you're suggesting he'd lie to protect himself?
Like,
There's something that's not jibing here.
Something like the idea that he has locked these people into a legal contract that could literally break them in half financially. That's not an indication that he wants something not revealed.
I think Warren made a mistake here by focusing on the believe women thing, though. Like, I think that's an important slogan, I guess, the thing behind it, but it's limited. Right. And especially in this case, there are other people who witnessed this happening.
Right. That's what she should have leaned into.
Right.
She said this,
to her words.
Yes, this is, you know what? That's a really important point. Dude, this isn't he said, she said. Fair point. There's a contemporaneous witness confirming to the T. So the question is, Chris, actually, we're not doing he should. So either you haven't done the research to properly know the facts of the case, or you're ignoring vital evidence to ask a question about, in a way that's different than the evidence we have.
The real question for Chris Matthews is, why don't you believe her?
Right. Well, that's the point. I mean, I think, maybe Warren could have made the case, but it doesn't. But the point of this exchange is that it doesn't matter what the case that Warren is. Chris Matthews is so far away from believing that this exists that he can't even he
doesn't think there's things to look up on the internet about it. It seems like.
But the point is that he's so far experientially away. Now, I don't expect him to have been subjected to pregnancy discrimination, but he's not just questioning this. He's ignored this existence of this phenomena for decades. That's the only way that you could be sort of surprised in any way that could have actually gone on. I mean, that's the part that's really sort of stunning to me. That it's, at the very least, it's not equally believable that he would lie versus she would lie? What? Why would you lie about this to a billionaire when you're first of all, I think to the extent that we know, I don't know if we know her words. I don't know if we've actually heard the victim's words. We only know that contemporaneous thing, at least from that magazine piece. It was someone who overheard the conversation. That other woman is bound by an NDA. And I think all Warren's calling for is not a release from the NDAs about trade secrets about the Bloomberg terminals. It is release from the NDAs of any sexual assault or sexual harassment cases. I mean, seriously? And Bloomberg won't say yes, and you find it just impossible to believe that this guy could actually be lying?
He told you the NDAs were consensual. The harassment, maybe not so much.
Let's also, Chris Matthews is the same guy who, the reason the clip was so funny was that he was actually sad. I won't do the impression. It was a serious point. He was emotionally upset for Bernie Sanders calling our political process corrupt. Yeah. There are deep beliefs here across a variety of areas that are being upset.
Yeah.
You know what? He rules. I think he needs to keep on doing exactly what he's been doing on television where everyone can see.
Why would he lie?
Illustrative.
What possible reason could he have to lie in a moment
They'd be corrupt. Why would they lie? Why would they do that?